He does exist.
Okay.
I think,
Nkosi, if you exist, please come on to the State of the Nation. Come and tell us about all that red tape you've been cutting. I'm dying to meet you.
possibility of an ANC-DA marriage, which is probably not in conversation 2 years ago even.
No.
Right? Mad. That's mad.
It is mad.
It's actually fundamentally undemocratic.
Welcome to the State of the Nation. With State of the Nation is driven by Pace Car Rental. We've told you this before. Go out and rent a car from Pace. They're all around the country, all the airports, whatever you need. If you need to rent a car, a bakkie, or a bus or a thing, Pace Car Rental is the place to go, and their details are below. So we've done the marketing stuff. We know that South Africa is heading towards a very important election, and we've had some well-placed voices to hear from. One of those voices that I'm very excited to hear from today is a columnist, political commentator, and author, Qaanitah Hunter. It's probably, I would say, one of South Africa's best political journalists. And it really is great to have Qaanitah join us for the first time on the State of the Nation. Qaanitah, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Thank you very much for having me. This is very cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to have you. Yeah, I'm an avid reader of just about everything you've written, and now you've come out with this book, "Who Will Rule South Africa?" Strategically timed to come out just ahead of the election. That was not by accident. And you delve into how we got here and where we're going to, roughly. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, aren't you tired of being asked the question when you go to Braai's or when you meet people at Woolies or somewhere, like what's happening to South Africa? Or, are we becoming a failed state? And I think that was what really motivated me to sit down and say, all right, where are we as South Africa? Where do we come from? What does this current period look like, and where are we heading to? And it was not done in a way that there's so much that happens in South Africa every day, and we forget where we've come from, we forget the journey we've traversed. And so the idea was to kind of sit down for a moment, breathe, reflect, and kind of document forensically what the last 30 years has brought us, but also what does it mean for the future? Because the real question as we celebrate 30 years of democracy is, can South Africa sustain another 30 years? In 30 years' time, can we still have this conversation about the enduring nature of the South African democracy? And that's what many people are scared won't happen.
And before we get to the conclusions, because obviously
we could start there.
Let's start off with the conclusions in terms of the South African structure, because I think it is something that one gets asked a lot. If you're not getting asked, people aren't concentrating, because I should be asking the question, how secure is our democracy? How committed are we to the Constitution?
So South Africa has many bad political actors, but we are not a sum of our bad politics. And we've seen this over and over again, that there is nefarious attempts to capture our democracy, whether it was through the Guptas, whether it's through criminal syndicates, whether we saw violent efforts during the 2021 looting and civil unrest that plagued Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. But our democracy stands. And why does it stand? It stands because we have a really resilient constitution, we have a free media, we have an independent judiciary, and we have systems and institutions of state that are still intact. Now, this should not leave us with the conclusion that, all right, our democracy is fine, let's walk away. No, our democracy is fine despite efforts to chip away at it. And the reality of it is that if we don't protect our democracy, it may not be fine in 5 years, in 10 years. And we saw what happened in the Zuma years, is that we saw how the entire, just one part of the criminal justice system was completely repurposed to protect Zuma and his cronies. And we saw how easy it was to do that, and how long it has taken since 2018 to undo that capturing of the criminal justice system. And so South Africa has a robust constitutional democracy, but you still have bizarre proposals like the MK Party and even Bongani Baloyi's Geluva saying that we should move from a constitutional democracy to a parliamentary majoritarian system. Nonsense. That was an apartheid. That was what happened in apartheid.
Yeah, I lived under that.
Not
wonderful.
Not fun. Not
No.
fun. Parliamentary supremacy. So if other words, if me and you get the most votes, we can just decide everything that should happen. There isn't checks and balances where we have now, where you have a constitutional democracy that's made up of the executive, the judiciary, the legislative arm, which is parliament. People just spit things around because current iterations of this system isn't working. It's not perfect. This constitution is not perfect. If it was perfect, we wouldn't have this many unemployed people. We wouldn't have this many people in poverty. But at the end of the day, it's the best we got.
I also think that I'm sure you would agree that I don't think the majority of South Africans understand how much of the system they enjoy. The freedoms, the freedom to say what you like, the freedom to run a podcast if you feel like, the fact that you don't have these highly sort of authoritarian systems.
Where else in the world can a 30-year-old, someone who is as old as the democracy, write a book assessing the state of the democracy?
Yeah. No,
that is the gift of South Africa's constitutional democracy.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people here from parties like MK.
Yeah.
And wanting to dismantle everything that has worked to those people's advantage. That sort of private school guy telling you how we need to nationalize everything.
Yeah.
There's a bit of dystopia involved there, and sometimes you don't know how good what does it say? You don't know how good you got it until it's
you
gone.
Lose it.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that South Africans we've seen, for example, the one thing that I bang on a lot about, because there are some parties that want to remove property rights. I want to say that's fine. You can take, what you have in mind is taking white farms.
Yeah.
But you remove property rights, you're also going to take away black people's rights to own a home, which was what the apartheid government also did to them.
Yeah.
And that's not great.
And the reality of it is that people can have all of these opinions, say what you want to. But at the end of the day, nuance is important. And sometimes when you bring facts to a discussion, or when you kind of raise these rational objections to populist rhetoric, it's often interpreted or just kind of shut down.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really important to kind of take a moment and have a sober discussion about, I'm looking at this book here, John Steenhuisen has said, do away with broad-based black economic empowerment and don't have any race-based transformation policies. Okay, what is that going to mean? Literally, and research-driven. Despite, we can all admit that the iteration of BEE has been bad and it hasn't resulted in a real transformation of the lives of black people who were marginalized under apartheid. But you take it away and then what? And so the idea that we kind of must all sing from the same hymn sheet or not talk at all is problematic in a democracy where we're able to have these robust conversations, and at the end of the day, the vote is going to decide whether the voter will decide whether they believe that populist policies around nationalization of everything will succeed or not.
And of course, if South Africans disliked democracy that much, we wouldn't have a record number of parties standing for election.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We'd have two parties. They're like, to me, that's the opposite of democracy. What you see in countries like America, two parties. And that to me isn't democracy.
But then you also have what's called hyper-fragmentation of the opposition, which is it's not necessarily like a bad thing. It is what it is. But there's consequence, right? And the consequence to that is where you have this steep decline of the ANC, you're not seeing a massive increase in support for at least 2, 3, 4, 5 big political parties. And that for me is quite absurd in many ways. The DA is not growing at the rate in which the ANC is decreasing. The EFF is not growing at the rate that the ANC support is decreasing. And that's simply because you have this hyper-fragmentation of 70 political parties and 11 independents. And what we've seen since 1994 is that around a dozen plus 1 or 2 make it to parliament anyways. So 12, 13, 14, that's kind of the range of parties that end up making it. So we're going to have this really long ballot with 2 columns. We're going to have 3 ballots, obviously, because now we have a regional vote as well. But just kind of a dozen or so make it to parliament. And this time is obviously more interesting because we're not going to have a single party who has a majority in some provinces and possibly in a national level.
Yeah, I've spoken to leaders of many of the new parties, including some that I know will not make it to parliament. To me, the question that comes to my mind is who's throwing this money down the drain? Right?
No, and that's exactly it, because it's, I've been thinking about this a lot, because there is, the exact number evades me, right? But let's use 870 something, right? So 400 seats in the National Assembly and 470 seats plus in between the 9 provinces, right? So there's under 900 jobs up for grabs, right? There are 14,900 plus candidates for 800 jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in a way,
you have a less than 5% chance as a candidate.
It's madness. But hey, in a way, you could argue that one of the net results is going to be almost consolidation when you've got so much choice.
Yeah,
people are you're making it easier for the big guys because, I mean, you can see that in retail. If you had a spaza shop on every corner, eventually you go to the Checkers down the road, because you just can't make a choice. You can't discern one from the other. So you've had a deep look into where we are. Especially, I know you've had a close examination of the current administration, right? The governance of Cyril Ramaphosa and his administration, which now obviously has a track record.
Yeah.
And my word, what a track record they have. We didn't think it would be possible to make Jacob Zuma look good. But Cyril Ramaphosa has done a hell of a job. I mean, the guy's allowed corruption, spiraling crime, a complete collapse of infrastructure, nobody paying for this, and he's put money in his couch, and he's managed to mangle all of our legal framework within SARS and within all Reserve Bank that blue-ticked that kind of move. It's kind of crazy.
Absolutely. So let's rewind. So from 2017 up until 2019, I covered Cyril Ramaphosa full-time, and I wrote a book about it called Balance of Power, Ramaphosa and the Future of South Africa. And it tracked Ramaphosa's rise in the ANC and how he became president, and with this sort of behind-the-scenes maneuvers in a front-row seat to how he became president. And remember the mood at the time. The mood was optimistic. It was this utopian. We call it Ramaphoria, where fundamentally, I think South Africans believe that we had been far too gone as a country under Jacob Zuma, and that nobody can be worse than him, and so anything will be better than him. And that's why that very utopic atmosphere that the world, that South Africa had obviously embraced. He made promises of a new dawn. The Tumamina speech. You'll remember that State of the Nation speech of 2018. Now, that moment was electric. You could feel it. You could taste it. There was this optimism about South Africa. And what was the ticket of why this optimism Cyril Ramaphosa? One, because he was not Jacob Zuma, and two, there was this notion that he was a rich man, so he wouldn't really steal. But it didn't really drill down to other leadership qualities. And 6 years later, we've come to see firsthand what are those leadership qualities that Cyril Ramaphosa took to the union buildings. One, indecisive. The man will not make a decision until he's forced to. The second week of February, he said he's looking for his pen to sign the NHI. It is May. He has not signed the NHI. Not to say he should sign the NHI, but tell us one or the other. Secondly, we never know where he stands on issues. There's always this kind of difference between him and the ANC, when in fact, I think Cyril Ramaphosa has been more about party before state than even Jacob Zuma was. He has put the party first at every single level. The The third thing is you have a president that shies away from accountability. And I'm not saying this lightly. He does not take interviews, if meaningful interviews. His engagements in parliament are ineffective. And so as a result, there's always this kind of excuse making on his behalf. Kind of, it's not Ramaphosa, it's the ANC. And I think he's held that cover in front of him as he sailed through this last 6 years, where the state of, where there's no reform in terms of Eskom. No, it's Gwede Mantashe's fault. There's problems in local government. No, it's, and obviously one does not take away from the fact that he inherited a, can I swear?
Yeah, we're not on national television. Yeah.
He inherited a shit show, right?
Yeah.
But the reality of it is he had come with a lot of promises. And those promises of reform were not executed at a speedy rate. So am I saying it was, complete wasted 6 years? No, there have been reforms. What are those reforms? SARS is fundamentally reformed, and that's important because the revenue collector is now not captured. Right, great. You have reform at the National Prosecuting Authority. Great. But that was top level reform. You took the bad apples out and you put new guys in. Is that leading to any meaningful convictions? Because you promised the electorate. We didn't ask this of you. You promised the electorate to say people are going to be in orange overalls. We're the people in orange overalls 6 years later, right? And then you have to contend with the fact that there are regression in the ANC's own progress. So regression around the fact that children under the age of 10 years old are not reading for meaning, going back to a 15-year ago mark, right? So what you're seeing is some sort of regression in terms of electricity, obviously with load shedding. Now we have not had electricity for a month, touch wood, but realistically speaking, there's a regression in that regard. Think about access to the interruptions to water supply. So we have the Stats SA report that's saying, more people have access to water, but the reality of it is that there's no water coming out of these taps that you've built for people. Why? Because of mismanagement. And so I try to be pragmatic and check myself in terms of, are we being too harsh on the president, right? And I really do, because I often get accused of being unfair, right? And I say, okay, from all the promises Ramaphosa made, he made a promise to cut his executive. That is like a cheap, easiest thing that you could possibly do.
The good old low-hanging fruit. Yeah.
Good old low-hanging fruit. What's the size of the executive? Bigger than Zuma's, right? Easy one to do. Capacity of the state. You can just make that your issue. You can make it your, this is the Ramaphosa legacy project. We're rebuilding capacity of the state. It takes months for DGs to be appointed.
Yeah.
Right?
More acting people than in a stage performance.
I can't think, besides that I mentioned the interventions at NPA and SARS, and we kind of looked through things quite strategically. Some of it is what you've inherited, for example, the breakdown in Denel, the breakdown in SSA, Transnet, etc. But what you found in the Ramaphosa years is that the reforms was not matching the pace of the decline. And so the decline was already over the edge. So you have this sort of gushing, just think of this idea of this sort of this gushing pipe, burst pipe. And somebody is kind of looking for a bucket really quickly. Mm-hmm. He's doing something. Mm. He's not doing nothing. He's not ignoring the burst pipe. But what is he doing? Trying to find a bucket.
Mm. Yeah, because even some of the areas, my favorite one, you talk about some of the promises he made, this guy may or may not exist. There's a chap floating around apparently by the name of Sipho Nkosi, who's meant to be the red tape cutter. This was my favorite. He announced that State of the Nation, this guy's going to come in there and cut government red tape.
Yeah.
We haven't seen or heard from him yet. I don't know if the man exists, but not one bit of red tape has been cut and everything's been added to.
I'll raise one on you. For 1 year, Sipho Nkosi didn't have any infrastructure, an office to work from, an email. It took them a year to empower, to sort, like, to give him a secretariat.
So he does exist.
He does exist.
Okay.
I think,
Sipho Nkosi, if you exist, please come on to the State of the Nation. Come and tell us about all that red tape you've been cutting. I'm dying to meet you.
But that's what I think was what Ramaphosa did, right? Because it was so easy to make these promises to the public. He almost gaslit us with all of these kind of interventions. You remember the smart city of the SONA of 2019, this dream of creating the smart city. When someone just can say to you that your existing cities are decaying at such a rapid pace, just look at Durban, look at Johannesburg, right? Then you had, these kind of promises around electricity minister. I'll give you another example. From 2018, the president has promised lifestyle audits for his executive. Only now, 2 months before elections, did they send forms to ministers to fill in to start a process of lifestyle audits for ministers and deputy ministers.
Okay, so all of this kind of lack of leadership should manifest in a poor election performance.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of polls coming out, and the polls are saying almost, all of them, that the ANC are going to slip below 50%.
Yeah.
What happens then?
Okay. So remember we said earlier that you have this weird scenario where the ANC is declining and the second, third, fourth party is not growing at the same rate of decline. And the ANC's majority, so it's 30 years, this is the 7th election that they're going into, and the majority is in jeopardy. First question is, by how much are they able to stabilize the free fall? So are they declining by 10%, which will put them at 47%, which is not terrible for them? Is it at 15%, which will put them at 42%? Or is it like 20% at 37%, right? That matters. So Ipsos recent poll put the ANC at 40%. Other polls, Brent has put them at 37%. I think that the ANC always pushes their election machinery closer to the time. So you'll see them picking up now in May. So I do think that they will arrest the free fall. And we're not going to see 37%. 20% in a single election cycle is a little bit stark. Maybe I could be grossly wrong, but generally, right? So, what does that mean for the DA? So, if the ANC in its best case scenario is declining 12%, let's put it at 12%. What is
45%?
45, 12%. Surely the opposition, official opposition, the DA, must rise by 12%. Okay, no, that's impossible. But 6%?
6%, yeah.
What are the polls putting the DA at?
Roughly where they were. But
One-ish percent more.
One-ish percent. But we do understand why in that particular case. The DA shunned the idea of growing. They chose not to grow.
Yeah.
So, that has caused me to be in the naughty corner with the DA, because this is something that they chose to do. To become unpalatable to the majority of South Africans was a decision that was taken. So that's fine. Let's leave them out of the equation, because they put their hands up saying, we got enough.
But now,
we've got just what we want. We don't want more.
In terms of forming a government, all over Europe where coalitions have been happening for years, decades, it's the two biggest parties that form coalitions. So it's the ANC will lead their process to form a coalition government, and the DA will form their process. And obviously the DA has said they're trying to form the multi-party charter. But if you're not growing, if you didn't have a successful election with growth of 5-8%, then you're going to have a problem, right? And that's when you then see, okay, so where the opposition support is going. So if the ANC's support is declining, where is it going to? Marginal support for a little bit support for the EFF, a little bit growth for the IFP, but fundamentally there is a disillusionment in traditional politics as we know it, and so people will test their votes out. MK Party, who is not in existence in October, in September, this book was finally proofread in September, and just after we had done it, MK Party was registered. We had no idea that it would become what it is. I'm not here to make a prediction that Jacob Zuma is going to be, but they will bleed into the support of both the ANC and the EFF. Are you going to see the rise of the extremes, the extreme right, the extreme left? I think so. And then at the same time, what you end up going to see is that, for me, I don't think people are talking about, because you ask what happens next when there's no majority. I don't think people are talking about the chaos that ensues when you have a government run by 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 parties. We've had test run of this, guys. We've had it in local government. We had it in PE. In Nelson Mandela Bay, a government doesn't even last a year because it's motion of no confidence. Basically, I, as ex-party, would 60,000 votes, managed to get about 2 seats, 1 seat in the National Assembly, 1 seat in Gauteng legislature, can become a kingmaker to topple a government.
Yeah, look, I think it is. I'm not 100% sure that it's complete apples with apples.
Say that again.
I'm saying that what you've said makes sense. It'll be destabilized, but I don't think that it will necessarily be that bad in the national context.
No, because there's a chance that it may not be that many people, because it could be that the ANC and the DA form a coalition.
Yeah,
and that's possible.
And also, I think that there's a tendency amongst all of us, if there's a problem in another city, to say, "Oh, tut, I'm so glad that's not us."
Right.
And and then you carry on with your life. I think nationally, if you had the same mess that we've seen in Johannesburg or Kuruleni, eThekwini, Nelson Mandela Bay, it wouldn't just be the odd news paper. It would be people like yourself hunting down the government or sort of prominent people to question them on what they do. What I'm saying is that then you're playing with loaded guns.
Yeah, but at the same time, there isn't really a system, a real good system of accountability to prevent what's happening in local government and in the metros. Let's start with the first thing. Elections happens on the 29th of May.
Yes.
On the 1st of May, results will be announced. On the 5th of May, Wednesday, 5th of June, it will be proclaimed. They will from proclamation of election results, there's 15 days for the Chief Justice to call a sitting of the National Assembly, and there has to be the election, the swearing in of the 400 members of the National Assembly, and there has to be a vote to elect a president, and the president then creates his executive, the cabinet, right? So 15 days, right? So by mid-June, it has to be sorted out. Political party leaders have proven to not be mature, right? Thirdly, what is negotiated in those 15 days is behind closed doors. It can happen at a bar here in Johannesburg and nobody would know. The coalition agreements that are signed between political parties is not binding, which means we can agree today on this and tomorrow we can make a demand for that. And as a voter, oopsie, right? Now think about if these negotiations have to happen times 5, times 6, times 7, right? Then you have no electoral thresholds, right? Which is necessary when it comes to coalitions, because you have the situation of what happened in Johannesburg, a party that had a few thousand votes, 2 PR seats, Al Jama becoming the mayor. right? Mad. That's mad.
It is mad. Yeah.
It's actually fundamentally undemocratic because the voters did not choose you to lead.
Yeah, not even close.
Not
No.
even close.
Yeah.
Right? And then you have no restriction on motions of no confidence. So I get elected as the president. I give my State of the Nation address. In September, I get onto my plane. I get onto an SAA flight because there's no, go to the New York General Assembly. When I'm there, boom, one of my coalition partners falters. And then there's a motion of no confidence. And then on my way back from New York, while I'm in the air somewhere across the Atlantic,
Yeah.
removed.
Yeah. Now, I would still take that over an ANC majority.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. Coalitions are not good or bad. Coalitions are what South Africans want. We have to just prepare for the consequences of it, which is what we didn't do in Johannesburg, and we didn't do it in Tshwane.
But
Do you get my point?
Yeah, I do get it.
We can't sit here and say, "Oh, guys, coalitions are terrible." And I mean, that's what the opposition is trying to, at least the ANC is trying to say. Look what has happened. In coalition-led Tshwane, for example, vote for the ANC, vote for one party. This party. It's nonsense. The voters will decide whether they're going to give a single party a majority mandate or not. If they don't, what I'm saying is that we're ill prepared for what's to come.
Yeah, obviously, I hear what you say about the ill preparedness, but I question whether we are that ill prepared. I'll just say.
Do you not see what's happening in Ekurhuleni?
Yeah, I don't think the one equals the other. I really do see them being quite different here. I mean, the mechanism, it looks similar.
Right.
And on this,
So do you think politicians will just grow up because it's national government?
I'm saying that they'll have no option but to grow.
No. So that's where.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what I'm saying is that the price to pay in eThekwini, Johannesburg, etc., where the behavior has been so bad, is incredibly limited because it generally happens in a small, smoke-filled room without a lot of cameras. It's not really in the public's eye because it's always somewhere else. If it's happening in your city, you're feeling the pain, but the rest of the country isn't. And it's over in a day or two, and we go on with our lives. I'm saying nationally, there wouldn't be a talk show, a news bulletin that would let it alone if somebody did exactly what you're suggesting. I'm saying it's the kiss of death for a political party to behave badly in a national coalition. It will be. People talk about what's going to kill parties. That's what's going to kill parties. Go and be a bad partner in a governing coalition.
Oh, you mean that voters will punish you
the
next time?
voters will punish you.
Yeah.
Right? I think
because it's not fun and games anymore. South Africa's on the brink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I see the stakes as being so high that you almost want to say, well, look, go for it.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be the end of your party. I mean, take an example of, the EFF's behavior in coalitions.
Yeah.
Then you flip-flop, then you go from one side to the other, then this, that, and the other. They have to do that once in a national government.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that, you will have 100 articles about are these guys serious about it or not. They're people getting questioned, interviews, etc., And I'm almost saying, as bad as it sounds, that we need it.
Yeah.
We need to understand, governance. We are playing with chainsaws.
Yeah.
And in South Africa, as we've seen over the last 30 years, I'm not going to just blame it on the last 15.
Yeah.
The last 30 years, we've been playing with chainsaws.
Yeah.
We've been saying, oh, well, you know what, we can just question property rights. Oh, you know what, we'll debate it. We'll just debate it as if it's a normal thing. The rest of the world doesn't have to buy our crazy. The rest of the world is here to invest or not invest. They don't have to buy the crazy. We have to buy the crazy. Yeah. So we might be okay with everybody calling each other comrade, but our investors won't be that happy to hear, to see a government behaving badly. And you will have the what we would all see, and we'll feel pain. The rand will go to 100 to the dollar. Our petrol price will go to 10 times what it is now. There will be real pain felt. And unless there's an army ready to go and exercise a military coup, and there we've got to thank God that the ANC is so bad, because the army couldn't do a military coup because they can't even run their own trucks, right? And what I'm saying is that this sober up situation is desperately needed in South Africa. And if that is what it's going to take, as a South African, I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy to pay that price.
And so there's a scenario. I mean, we paint various scenarios of what's possible, and we use the local government experience in terms of, the Joburg scenario, the Mangaung scenario of not to say it will translate exactly what happened, but I'm saying those are the different scenarios. But the one thing that we unpack in this book, the possibility of an ANC-DA marriage, which is probably not in conversation 2 years ago even.
No.
And there's a lot more warming up to the idea that in the interest of stability, for the sake of the future, for the sake of the country, the party with the most votes and the second most votes come together on some sort of agreement. The one iteration of it that we write about is a possibility that you say, we don't split executive power, we split it in terms of you take executive power, we take legislative power. Which could work. And it has happened before in local government, by the way. I think that lots of people are like, it can never work. It has happened in local government. I swear to you, there's a speaker from one party, there's a mayor from another party. It exists, right? So we're going to see that. So I hear you when you say that probably this is the moment of fear that South African politicians need. But what I'm also cautious of is that we have seen South African politicians literally willing to burn the house down.
Very few of them.
Very
few of them. Yeah, very few of them. And I think that's the defining struggle in South Africa, is it's time to say, right, who's really keen on this idea? Let's really evaluate it. Who's really keen on it? Because, it always feels to me sometimes, in South Africa, I lived through the whole negotiation period, the end of apartheid into the new South Africa. And there's a sort of a feeling out there and from all sides that there wasn't this fight. We're not happy with the judge's outcome of this particular fight. We should have carried on. We should have had a rematch, despite the price. And I'm saying that, we avoided what could have been a really messy situation in the early 90s. I would stop short at calling it a civil war, but a really messy situation that could have happened then. And all that brought us was 30 years of a death by 1,000 cuts. Now we're going to have a different fight. And the fight is going to take place politically. And, I think it's, as you say, I was interviewing JJ Tabani, and he said, what do you think of coalitions? He says, it doesn't matter what I think of them, they're going to happen.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little bit more radical on this, and I'm saying, let's finally lance this wound, because it has to be lanced. Let South Africa understand what happens the day after you vote to repeal property rights. Let's see what happens. Because what happens is, it's 2 weeks in New Zimbabwe. I'm not making this up, it's for real. Every foreign investor would cease to invest. They would pull their money out of this. I was a young, sort of just started working when we had the international banks call up South Africa's debt. I think it was 1985, right? The country collapsed in a week. In a week, that apartheid government was on a short road to negotiations. From being all powerful. Those and the world had already disinvested over a period of 10 years.
Can I ask you this?
Yes.
For the majority of South Africans who languish in poverty, right? The democratic project not really working, not really reaping the benefits that were anticipated, right? So you have people living in squalor. You have what is there to lose?
A lot more than you think.
Yeah.
I'm not
saying I agree with it. Okay.
I think those people understand it too. There is a bit more.
Because this is it's not a conversation of yes or no. I'm just saying that
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that at the end of it all, the human spirit doesn't really want chaos.
Yeah.
Chaos, a few people always want chaos. Most people just want to get on with it.
Which is what I noticed when we did that investigation into the July unrest, right? And 2020. That was the worst violence we've seen post-apartheid, right? 334 people died, 50 billion rand wiped off the GDP of KwaZulu-Natal. Hectic, right? But the reality of it is, that's the that's the fruit of democracy, that it only lasted 8 days.
Yeah, it was, as far as insurrections go, it was a pretty piss poor effort, to be honest.
It really is. And think about
considering that other citizens put it down because the government stepped back.
Yeah.
It's an incredible
That's exactly
thing.
it. The fact that it was not ended and stymied by the state. It was done by literally citizens. And you look at other countries, you look at Sudan, for example, and you see two army bros who were friends that were killing people in Darfur together now turn on each other, and literally there's nothing. The entire country has gone down. It's finished, and so. But again, so I hear you when you say that the fabric of our constitution is resilient. I get what you're saying.
I think the fabric of South Africans is resilient. I think the Constitution is the mechanism. I think there's a lot of people that still need to be sold on the value of the Constitution. But I think that South Africans themselves, want a better place for their children.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of these people that live in squalor, for example, is also, there's also a little question there. Right? You've got people leaving their rural homes to live in squalor in cities when they've got another house in a rural area.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
But we as two privileged people, we can't weigh in on that.
No, you can, because what I'm saying is that it's not like Brazil, where the favelas is where those people live and there's nowhere else for them to go to. I'm saying that fight isn't a fight over my home. This is my sort of business address, if you know what I mean. There is a part of this that what I'm saying is that South Africans, to some respect, can deal with this because of their, they've got agency, is really what I'm saying. I don't buy this thing of people in South Africa not having agency. I think we do.
And so that's the thing that Martin Mukanya wrote in his column, Reflection on 30 Years, is that don't throw the fruits of democracy away and say it may be imperfect, but it's working. Yeah.
Yeah, I often wonder, do we really think that South Africa is ready for an authoritarian government? And I don't see it. I think we're just too noisy. Not just you and I. I'm talking about all South Africans. We've gotten used to that. We saw it.
No, we like freedom.
We do. You and I like it a lot. But who also really likes it? Poor people are quite happy with it. That's why they put down the riots in 2021.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit cautious on this. Like it might go up
of
in flames.
Like this country's at the end of the brink. I hear you. Yeah.
We watched with horror what was going on in the late 80s and into the 90s with in rural KZN.
Yeah.
And it was really a little, what do they call it, internecine battle, for the heart of the Zulus. And the rest of the country, we went on with our work. And I do think that the moment is going to come when people will have to be a little bit more adult, a little bit more mature about it, as horrible as it sounds. But that's what I think. So. But
because that's the point that we make in the book, and so a lot of people asked us the question, why did you use the word rule? Because we this is not a monarchy, and we purposely use the word rule because I'll spoil the book for your audience and say who will rule South Africa? You and I will rule South Africa.
Yeah.
And I don't say that facetiously. I say it in a way that we deliberately decided on a participatory democracy. And so the fact that we vote is the first level of participation. And beyond that, I think what coalitions and the scenario that you are painting is going to have an added responsibility on me and you and South Africans and people watching to say, our participation doesn't start and end with casting a vote. We have to breathe down the neck of the people that we employ, because we're just employing 870 plus people on the 29th of May. That's simply what we're doing.
And just to go back to the destabilized metros, in just about every single case, if you really look at what was the thing that was destabilizing it the most, was the fact that your ANC vote, which in almost every case was the largest block of voters in I think every one of those areas, but the ANC were able to mobilize national resources to destabilize those cities. Right? Water is a national competency. Safety and security is a national competency. They were able to fund and defund certain things. They were the ultimate people that were destabilizing these coalitions so that they could get back into power. And we probably know why. It's going to be.
I also think immaturity. There's a series of issues. If you look at Nelson Mandela Bay, yes, it's one of it, but I don't think it's all of it.
It's not all of it. I'm not saying, but I'm saying they're meant to be the adult in the room. They're the government, for God's sakes. They're the guys meant to be making things better for citizens, and they're using every trick in the book to make things worse. And I don't think that voters are going to be very happy about that when they go to the polls. So, how did we end up here? We went way off the track.
It's a fun conversation.
Listen, you want to have some fun, read this book. Go and buy this book. It's a wonderful book, Who Will Rule South Africa. This is not just a book that you have to read before the end of May. It's a book's going to live and last, right? And it's going to give you great insights into South Africa and some of the things that we will be seeing in South Africa soon. But Qaanitah Hunter, it was wonderful to have you. We've got to have you back because
No, of course, I will be back.
To everybody that joined us today, I hope we got a little bit excitable over here. So if you enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel. We'll have more and more analysis. We'll have Qaanitah back. Qaanitah, thank you once again.
Thank you.
And to everybody, we'll see you the next time on The State of the Nation.